Just a little nonsense there for fun. Anyway, hello everyone. My name's Billy Sheehan. I'm a bass player. I've been around for a long, long time. I have played for over 50 years, which means I'm an old man. But I got to see Hendrix play. Ha ha. And thanks very much to Sweetwater for having me come out. Usually when I do a clinic, there's mostly questions and answers, but since you're sitting so far away, I'll pretend you asked the question, and I'll make up questions for myself. But anyway, I've been playing for a long time. I've done, I don't know how many records. When I do a signing thing, somebody brings a stack of CD covers, and a lot of them I don't recognize. Are you sure I played on that? It says right here, so I guess I did. So that and about, I think I'm around 5,000 lifetime gigs. So the only, that's a lot of shows. That's a lot of strings. I bring that up because it just kind of illustrates the reason why I believe I'm here. I've had a lot of experience with just about everything you could possibly imagine and some things you couldn't possibly imagine. In the music biz, working with gear, being on the road, traveling, making records, songwriting, all those things. Since this is GearFest, we're going to generally concentrate on gear and fest. I'll do later. I'll do the fest afterward, but the gear first. Right now I'm playing my Yamaha Attitude bass. You may know about it, you may not. It's basically all the things I did to my old P bass when I was a kid, all done relatively incorrectly, adding the Gibson EBO humbucker pickup in the neck position by chiseling a hole in it in the living room floor, and my mom had to vacuum up the chips after I was done. But that was the beginning of that pickup. I didn't know how to wire two pickups to one output, so I put a second output in there and just ran another chord. People said to me, well, why didn't you run a stereo chord? I said, well, because if you're in Elmira, New York at midnight and your stereo chord breaks, you're probably not going to find another stereo chord anywhere. So two mono chords is a lot safer and a lot easier, and that works out. But other than that, it's pretty much based on a P bass, except for one very, very important feature that it has, which is the neck-to-body joint. You'll notice some odd configuration of screws on the back there. My only problem with the P bass is when I did a bend, not my only problem, there's a couple problems, but it's still such an iconic, great instrument. You can't really have a complaint about a P bass no matter what. But if I do a little bendy neck thing, because I can always get people ask, as an aside, people ask about a 4 or 5 string bass because they can get the low B note. I said, well, I can get a low B note out of my bass too. So I just hit, here's a B, drop the low E down to a D with the hip shot D tuner, and bend that down to a B. Save money on strings. 20%, in fact, if you do the math. So, but when I did that, the neck-to-body joint would shift in the socket like this, and the strings would end up being like that in the middle of the song, and I'd have to give it a little chiropractic crack back to get it back in. So I had pounded in all kinds of picks and shims and tried everything possible to keep that neck solid. But again, all tribute, rightfully so, to the amazing P bass. They used the wrong screws, and the screws have play in them where the body is. So what we did is just to make sure this neck never moved, it actually sinks into the body underneath the pickup. It has 3 screws there. On the inside, it has screws going into a little tongue that goes there. And then recently on this bass, they put these screws here. I'm going to strangle myself. At this angle, at that angle, in order to pull the neck into the body solidly. And it makes a really huge difference with the sustain and clarity and tonality of the instrument. So I'll shut up about my bass here, I promise. And all DiMarzio pickups, Rotosound strings, hip shot D tuner, and that's what that is. Over here, I'm using my Hartkey. They're the brand new HD 115-inch speakers. I just found out that they've done a little bit of a tweak on them, on the manufacturing, to soften up some of the mid-range and they're sounding very good to me. LH1000 amps. It's a very simple amp. It's input, volume, middle, treble, bass, output, thank you, good night. That's about all that it is, which is kind of good. And then on the other hand, I have the Helix, the Line 6 Helix, which I've been using quite a bit now for over a year. I had a preamp custom made for me back in the late 70s by a guy named Dan Pierce out of Buffalo, New York. He made the famous Pierce preamps. And that amp was just an amazing, incredible thing. I don't know what it was about it. It would just sing as the note would fade away. The tails would go right to clean tone, and it was just a beautiful, harmonically rich, incredible thing. And I got so used to it from playing it for so many years, I really wanted to have that as my main sound source. And carrying it around in a rack, though, became difficult. So I contacted Line 6, and they agreed to model my actual original Pierce preamp, and they did. It took them longer than they thought. They thought it would be very simple, but it turned out to be a kind of a complex circuit. Hopefully I'm not boring too many people with the technical details. Oh, I'm sure I am, but I'll go ahead anyway. But they had for example, on a square wave, they had a Moog synthesizer circuit that was designed to turn a square wave into a sine wave by softening the edges. And so it has that in there. So when the distortion happens, a square wave becomes a smooth, silky, soprano sax-like kind of a tonality. And they did the model. I went to check it out, and it was just spectacular. So I'm very pleased with that. Generally, I play with a really distorted tone on one pickup and a super on the other pickup. And when they're mixed together, it's supposed to sound kind of somewhat like a real bass. So when you're playing with the drummer, it kind of sounds like a guitar is trying to play along with me. So it sounds like that's in there too. I started off in the early days of a band called Talus, playing a three-piece band. Woohoo! Right on. And we didn't have a rhythm guitar player or keyboard player. It was just guitar, bass, drums, and we all sang. So we found out that if we added a guitar player, a second guitar player for the rhythm parts, or keyboard player, if you're making $100 and there's 3 guys, that's $33 each. But if you're making $100 and there's 4 guys, it's only $25 each. So we decided to cheap out and go the easy route. And I started to do a thing with my bass to try to make up for the lack of rhythm guitar player. So I always, like we would do Kansas Carry On Wayward Son, and I do the little keyboard step. It saves us lugging that B3 around, that's for sure. That was a beautiful thing. We used to do a song called Schizoid Man by King Crimson. And the main riff we play a lot of chords too to just make up for the sound, the wall of sound that the band needed. But that riff had a soprano sax, little trill in the middle of it, and it didn't sound right to me unless we had that. So I managed to get it. Sneak that in there, and it saved us hiring a sax player too. And you know how daunting that can be. Anyway, so that's the whole idea of the gear was generally built to create sound live that made the band work, made it happen. And I'm very pleased. There's also a little pedal up on the top there that I'm experimenting with by a company called Suncoast out of Buffalo, New York. Again, the gentleman. Jim Sikora, he bought up all of the old Pierce parts when Pierce went out of business, and he's putting them into pedals, and it's got a great clean tone. Generally, play with distortion, but you can edit that, right? So I play with distortion, but sometimes put a clean tone in there also, and this particular pedal has a spectacular clean tone, and it's been working out very well for me. So that's a little bit about my gear. I think, again, I said Rotosound strings and Hipshot detuner and all that, but this would be the part where you ask me a question. Now, the question I get most often from bass players is three-finger technique about it. And it's pretty simple. Basically, I'm just playing in that order. When you're doing 4 with 3, 1 lands on a different finger each time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Slow down. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So to keep it sounding like 4, you have to hit that accent. And then lately, I've just been skipping the whole thing and going to 4 fingers, which makes even more sense somehow. And since I've been off the road a little bit this year, I've worked very hard on finding some new ideas on bass as far as what I'm playing. And a couple of the things that I'm working on, which I haven't got completed yet, is just a lot of... a little kind of a fifths. I used to, when I was a kid back in Buffalo, New York, be in my apartment and people come over, knock on the door, and I'd have my bass on, and they'd say, "Don't you ever put that thing down?" And I'd say, "Well, as a matter of fact, I don't." And so I practice a lot then, but I'm practicing even more now. And at my particular age, usually you start to slack off and relax on it a bit and let it go, but actually the opposite is happening to me. I don't know exactly why. I'm just pushing it harder than I've ever have, and it's an incredible joy to do so. I go around the world and do clinics like this, often with an interpreter, translator, in places where English is not the native language. And it's quite fascinating to see people get more and more and more involved in music. And as they go on and move forward and expand as an artist, it's a wonderful thing to do. So I do enjoy doing the clinics for that reason, among many. And what else can we talk about? Somebody yell something out. What's that? Very good question. He asked who inspired me. Now I'll launch off on a thing. As long as I need a little seed to plant there, and I'll go with it. Paul Samuel Smith from the Yardbirds. Paul Samuel Smith played in a band called the Yardbirds. They're most famous for their 3 guitarists, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, and Jeff Beck. Whoever they were, I don't know. But he was an amazing player, and having a rave up with the Yardbirds was one of the first records I ever really got into. That came from actually the Over Under Sideways Down record. That was a song called Lost Woman. But I remember he's the reason also why I put that pickup in my bass, because he had the super deep low end. You're smiling like you do know what the Yardbirds are about. I'm glad somebody here does this. Right on. But Paul Samuel Smith was a huge influence on me early days. And the band itself, too, was awesome. And that's why I got so heavily into Jeff Beck in the early days as well. Later after that, Tim Bogert from the Vanilla Fudge, who was just a spectacular player, kind of all over the neck, but it's so brilliantly done. It's just musical and orchestral and fantastic. And I had the great honor of finally meeting Tim and getting to become friends with him. And he basically told me he was just imitating Jamie Jamerson, only in a psychedelic version. And in a way, he's kind of right, because Jamie Jamerson on a lot of the Motown stuff, he was all over the place. Drums were pretty straight. If there was a guitar, it was pretty minimal. But the bass was moving all over the place as the main melody. I think that's Paul McCartney may have been influenced by that a little bit as well, because bass in a lot of those early songs is the most active instrument. Matter of fact, in bands in the old days, when I first started, having a B3 was more important than having a guitar in the band, because the copy songs you were doing, it was much more important to have that B3 tone. So those are the two first guys, and then just about everybody since them. And not only bass players, a lot of guitar players, a lot of sax players, a lot of piano players, all the octave. But I saw piano players play an octave. I thought there's got to be a way to... Aha, there it is. So stolen piano technique. Oh, that's okay. And I listened to a lot of sax players, a lot of B3 players. I was in a band with a blind B3 player when I was very young, a guy by the name of Ray Schmaltz, an amazing, incredible B3 player, blind since birth. And so he had an extra sense of music and tonality that is not uncommon with people that lose a sense. The other senses make up for it. And so I learned about Jimmy Smith and all these great jazz players. And Vanilla Fudge also, the Tim Bogart came from. That was a heavy B3 band as well. And then, but my real reason for getting involved in playing music was when I saw the Ed Sullivan Show and I saw the Beatles. And that launched about 10 million careers, I think. I know very few guys from my generation that did not start when they saw that TV show. And they saw all the girls screaming for the guys on stage, and everybody said, I want that job. And that's exactly what we did. So my iTunes is quite extensive, and I collect, one of my specialties is garage rock from the 60s from all over the world. And it's amazing the amount of people that got into the Beatles that we didn't even know about. Of course, in America, Canada, and Britain, and Australia, English-speaking countries. But all the other countries did too. So I've got Beatle copy bands from Ecuador and the Philippines and Thailand and every place you could possibly imagine. Quite sweet and endearing what they did with the songs. There are translations of them. Of course, there were a lot of mistakes, but it was a beautiful thing to see that much change happen in the world from one little band coming out of Liverpool, England. They touched everybody, and there are tens of thousands of tracks and bands in that collection that I have in my iTunes. Pretty amazing. So, but I'm still getting influenced too. I listen a lot to classical music. Of course, Bach and Beethoven were my first, as most people, the most popular, Mozart, Bach, Beethoven. But later on, I began to get into Debussy and Ravel and Sir Arnold Bax and Holst and other guys that were a little different than these straight-up rhythmic aspects of Bach and Beethoven. So that was, those are my influences. Thank you for the question. Yes, sir, just yell it out and I'll make it happen. Oh, switching from guitar to bass. All right, coming over to the, first of all, you'll be way cooler. See, because bass has these big manly giant strings, and guitars is a little, looks kind of like a cheese cutter, a little E string. What am I going to do with that? I don't know. You know I'm kidding. It is a guitar world, and they just let us live in it. We know. We get it. We're the catcher on the baseball team. Got to work for a living. But going from guitar to bass is an important thing because it's important for everyone, I believe, to intimately know the instruments that is the instrumentation within your band. That's why I explained to bass players, you should learn drums. Bass players should learn about drums. you see the ridiculous kind of Facebook memes, you know, where scientists prove that the bass player is the most important. That's not true. It's the drummer. The drummer is the guy that drives the band. And that's what we follow. When I play bass, I'm just basically doing everything that drummer does, only giving it a pitch. You hear a beat, I don't know what key we're in. Oh, we're in the key of G, G minor. You mark that out and the song is built from that. So for guitar players, there's a controversy with bass players that's kind of ridiculous, is if you play with a pick or your fingers. For me, I play with my fingers always, pretty much. I can play with the pick a little bit, but it does not matter one bit whether you play with your fingers or with a pick, or if it's a 4-string, a 5-string, or a 6-string bass, whatever. All those permutations matter not at all. What matters is you getting the right notes for the right song the right way, and it doesn't matter how you get them. So if you want to play with a pick and continue on with whatever picking technique you might have from guitar, that's cool. If you want to adventure into fingers, the same rule applies. Some people think, well, 3 fingers has got to be way better than 2 fingers. It's not necessarily. It's just a different thing. We're all musicians here mostly, and any choice you make is an artistic choice, and it is your right to make that choice, and it does not put you in any category. If you want to play with just your thumb or just your index finger and play very simple whole notes, that's your art. God bless you. Fantastic. Awesome. I hate to see online when people go at each, especially musicians going after other musicians' throats because they might play with a pick or might do something a little bit out of the ordinary. I hate to see that. So use a pick if you want. Use your fingers if you want. I just did not necessarily meant to be a plug, but I just did an online music lesson thing with the Yamaha Corporation. I put a link to it on my Facebook page. And it's for all level players. I also did a VHS back in the day video for beginning bass. You could probably find it on YouTube pretty easily. And it's the basic, simple, easiest things you need to know just to start. And I purposely did it and simplified it because so many people use those instructional videos as a way to show off their fancy licks, and they weren't really concerned with instructing young players. So I really tried to break it down and make it easier for people to understand what's necessary for them to start off on bass, how to hold it, how long should your strap be. It was an odd thing. Now, I've traveled all over the world and done all kinds of clinics and records and videos and all kinds. Actually, the number one question I have is about that strap length thing. Because when I sit down, the bass is in the exact same place as it is when I stand up. So all that time sitting down practicing, which you will probably do a lot of, I guess you could stand up and practice if you want, but then you stand up and the bass is down here, suddenly nothing works anymore, and you're trying to, why can't my fingers do it anymore? So when it's in the same spot, and this is just one man's opinion for one particular thing, it's very easy to duplicate what you were practicing again. But up here, generally you see the bow tie bass players with the bass up way high. Yeah, it's real easy to get into everything, but it doesn't look too cool, and you always have to have a really good belt buckle in order to make up for the lack that it's being covered up. Right about here is mid-range. That's cool for me. It works good. Down here, it looks way better, but boy, it's tough to play. So you're going to be that's why a lot of punk bands, I think, do that, because it's easy to play that low E. When you got it down there like that. But yeah, I hope you do transition over to bass, even if you still continue to play guitar. I play a little bit of guitar, about just short of Neil Young level on my soloing on guitar, which is where all I love to. But to write songs, it's a lot easier to be strumming chords and singing. I can strum chords and sing all day. If I'm overplaying and they want me to shut up, they'll give me a vocal part. And then I know I'm going to have to stop and play that one note while I sing the song. It works like a charm. But I would advise you to learn bass, even if you're going to stick with guitar. They're both complement each other. And get with the drummer, too. Drums are super important. Keyboards we don't see as much in a lot of rock bands, but it's also, most music is built around the keyboard, so if you know a little bit about it, if you can even fake your way around, it's going to improve your situation, I'm sure. But drums for sure, and thank you for coming over to the dark side. I appreciate it. Someone else, you got to yell it out really loud. I'll get this guy in front because I know I can hear him. Yes, sir. The scalloping is always a question I get on that. The scalloping, if you can't see it, it's the wood between the frets has been kind of filed down a little bit. The point of it is maybe I can get up to a high G note, which extends the bass even further. I did it. I'd known about scalloping for many, many years. When I was young, the John McLaughlin and the Mahavishnu Orchestra came out. Everybody blew their minds. We found out that John McLaughlin's Les Pauls were scalloped. And so we all thought about it. A couple of guys did it, but we were too poor to be hacking up our guitars quite yet. And we didn't have as many extras. So sure enough, years went on, and Talus was opening up for Yngwie Malmsteen on his first U.S. tour. It was a Talus Yngwie tour, and Yngwie and I became very good friends, and he had his whole neck entirely scalloped. So I thought, that's a lot of wood to lose on a bass. It's going to make the neck unstable because the bass neck is longer and just it needs to be solidly there. So I had my Dremel Moto tool with me. I always carried my tools with me because we always, as an aside, when bands would stay in hotels, the people at the front desk would be all worried about it because, oh God, now what are they going to do to our rooms? You know, terrible. And I felt bad about it because it gave all musicians a bad name when musicians would check into a hotel and break stuff and screw things up. So I had my toolkit with me all the time, and I would go in hotel rooms and fix things. So the maid would come in later and say, hey, that lamp wasn't working before. What's going on here? I'd fix it all. So I had my Dremel Moto tool with me. I took the strings off. I set the bass down and went for number one. I only went halfway across, too, because you couldn't push this neck down, this string down into the wood no matter what. It's just, it would be impossible. So I went halfway across. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the fifth one, it slipped and went across the frets, and I thought I ruined my bass, but I managed to polish out the hole I put in all the frets, and I said, I'm ending right there. So it isn't a real necessity. But it's kind of a neat thing, and it was there, and it helps me sometimes when I'm playing. I can feel where that scallop is, so I kind of know where I am without having to look sometimes. But it's always an interesting curiosity, and I've played on guitars that are fully scalloped, and it's kind of odd. It's if you've ever played an Indian sitar, it's like that. The fret is like floating in the air, and the string is in between it, and you've got to have really good touch in order to not pull things sharp and go way out of tune. So that's the story of the scallop. And yes, sir, another one in the front, so I'll be able to hear him because I'm deaf from standing in front of amps for 50 years. Go ahead. Do I ever play fretless is the question. We played... What key is that? Trying to think of the key for Wild World, which we played in Mr. Big. When we did that song, I had a very, very famous fretless bass player called me up when he heard it on the radio. He goes, man, I can't believe it. You did Wild World fretless. I said, no, I didn't. I actually just used this one and bent the strings. So for me, it's kind of if I need to... Kind of sounds a little fretless, I guess. So it's just, I played also with another fretless player in a jam one time. This is a little derogatory, so I won't mention his name. But I'm on stage playing, and there's a fretless bass player playing with me. And while I was watching him play during the night, it sounded great. But I'm playing, and all of a sudden, what in the world is out of tune? Oh my! And I'm looking around like, do you guys hear this? And I'm thinking, man, it must be. I'm trying to put my ear on the thing. Am I in? Yes, I'm in tune. I figured it out, and I went over near the guitar player, and I said, hey, hit an open D. Yeah, I'm in. We went back and did another song. I thought, oh, it's not me. And it's funny how you really can't hear that out-of-tuneness. And it actually sounds great. And there's nothing wrong with that out-of-tuneness. Now, that was one particular bass player. He could have had a bad night, could have had a bad monitor, and I've heard fretless guys play perfectly in tune. and every cellist and violinist is in the same boat too, and those are real musicians. So there's no, so the frets are kind of like training wheels to some musicians, I think. They're fair enough, and they're better men than I. But I just prefer to stick with the frets because I like the sound of it too. That. And then also you can do when we're doing the winery dogs, I can also make the dog bark noise with the frets too. So people think there's a dog coming. My biggest applause of the clinic. Someone else had a hand up there. I hope they don't mind. They advised me not to take questions because it kind of slows down the live feed, but I'll repeat the question. Yes, sir, in the white hat. Just yell it out really loud because I'm deaf. The relationship with drummers I play with. Ah, yes. Well, it just so happens that the greatest musician I know on any instrument is a drummer. And he changed my life. He really made me understand things that I had no idea about. And I play with him in a band called Niacin. His name is Dennis Chambers. And in my mind, in my heart, to me, he's the greatest musician I know. He did a clinic one time he told me about, which is quite funny, I think, I hope. And he's asking all the drummers are there, and somebody said, because there's a rumor that he never practices and he never warms up. So somebody got up and said, "Is it true you never practice?" And he goes, "Yeah." And the people are like, "We don't believe him." Kind of, they're, having this kind of thing going on. And he goes, "Here, I'll prove it to you." Well, let me ask you a question. How many of you guys have trouble with your playing? Raise your hand, and everybody, yeah, we got trouble. Okay, now how many of you practice? And they raise their hand. And he goes, "See, you can't fault his logic there. That's true." But he doesn't. He never practices, never warms up. And I've seen him. We were doing a recording session one time with Niacin. We had a leftover track that we were going to use another iconic, fabulous, famous drummer, but we had a problem with the tape machine at the time. We were using tape, and it just didn't work. So it was already 3 o'clock in the morning, and Dennis had already played all the tracks for the whole record in one night, better than we could ever imagine, about 10 pieces of music, amazing. She said, "Dennis, we got this one other piece of music. Would you mind just listening down and seeing if you could do it for us?" And it was speed up, slow down, 7/4, 11s, all kinds of crazy number and things like that. He listened to it once, went in and cut it with no notes, no nothing. Pretty amazing. Now, in all fairness, Vinnie Colaiuta did that one time too. I did a track, Van Halen's Light Up the Sky, me, Doug Pinnick singing, Yngwie on guitar, and Vinnie Colaiuta on drums. And Vinnie Colaiuta came in the studio, and it was just Vinnie and I doing bass and drums first. The other guys were going to hit it later. And I said, I told him, "Yeah, I worked out on the song." He goes, "Oh, I haven't heard it yet." He had never heard this song, which makes sense. I don't know if Vinnie sits around and listens to Van Halen records. I could imagine that he might not, so who knows. But he heard it one time, went in, and cut the track, and what you hear on the recording is his thing. So I've been very, very lucky to play with great, great drummers, and it's affected me positively and helped my playing immensely. Greg Bissonette from Eat 'em and Smile, just an amazing drummer. All original Talus drummers, Paul Varga, and then a guy named Mark Miller, who is mind-blowing. And I couldn't not mention my closest friend in the music business, who we lost a while back, Mr. Pat Torp from Mr. Big. Is just a spectacular player, and thank you. A wonderful guy, and we miss him immensely, believe me. So thank you for your question. How much time do I have? An hour and a half? "24 minutes, all right. Piece of cake." Yes, sir. In my whole career, what is my greatest musical accomplishment? Wow. Well, I'm very lucky and grateful and honored to have had a career at all. That's very nice. And that if there were any accomplishments in it, I'm even more grateful. But I found myself to be in a position of incredibly good fortune, surrounded by people that are supremely talented, and that has helped a lot. through the years, you set yourself goals and you hope you reach them. And I've been very lucky to reach or surpass most of the things I went for, which was pretty cool. Again, I'm supremely grateful to millions of people for allowing that to happen and for their assistance in making it happen. But probably the number one thing for me was we were on The Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson was still there, but Jay Leno was hosting. And they said, Jay wants you guys on the couch. Who's going to sit in chair number 1? And so the guys in the band looked at me because I was using the big mouth when I do all the talking. So I sat in chair number 1 on The Tonight Show and got my spot there. The same place where Oscar winners and kings and presidents and everybody had sat. So that was... Now, my mom doesn't really understand a lot of the accomplishments and any of their value because, God rest her soul, she's long gone. But at the time, she was a big supporter of mine and a big influence on me. She was a big Sinatra fan and turned me on to Frank at a very early age. And so I told her, "Hey, Mom, we got a new single. It's in the top 40. Oh, that's nice. That's good. Mom, it's top 20. Oh, that's nice. Hey, Mom, the single's number 1. Oh, that's very nice. Mom, number 1 video on MTV. Oh, that's very nice. Mom, our album went platinum." She goes, "Oh, that's very nice." I go, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to be on The Tonight Show." "What? You're kidding!" All the neighbors got called, and they freaked out. So at some point, there's an entry level in everyone's credulity, I guess. But and again, it's been an amazing thing. Having a hit single is a mind-blowing experience, and I wish it on every one of you at some point. If you can ever have a hit single, do it. It's an amazing experience. We went from 0 to 60 in about half a second. It was a beautiful thing. We would get on an airplane and be sitting in our little economy seats, and the stewardesses, or flight attendants, sorry, they were stewardesses back then. They would come back and ask, "Are you guys in a band?" You go, "Yeah." "What band?" "Mr. Big." "You ever heard of it?" No. Just, "I'm the one who," "oh my God." And next thing you know, we'd be sitting in the front, they put us in first class. Matter of fact, we flew on a Malaysian Airlines flight once, famous for having lost a plane in mysterious circumstances recently. And they let us sit in the cockpit. So we sat in the cockpit as the plane landed. So I don't know if that kind of lax security may have contributed to the later situation or not, but you never know. Certainly hope not. Anyway, who else has a question for me? Hey, John, how are you? Ladies and gentlemen, I have to embarrass you. There's a dear friend of mine, John Willis. He has been an incredible help to so many people online and to me personally for his expertise on the attitude bass, on the Helix, and all things audio, including the Fletcher Munson curve and many other aspects. John, I'm glad you're here. Thank you very much. Good question. I'll give you $5 later. Do I have any new music coming out? I'm doing a bass and drum record with Ray Luzier. He plays with Korn, and he's a dear friend of mine for many, many years, and he's an amazing drummer. So we're just doing bass and drums. We don't know what else we'll put on it. Maybe some crazy things after. I'm doing the bass for the new Sons of Apollo record right now, which is going to be a riot. Right on. I'm going to... we're probably going to do a Winery Dogs record after next year. Thank you. I'm supremely glad about that band. We have a riot playing that. Mike Portnoy is awesome. Richie Kotzen is a superstar, at least a superstar. And more coming from that as well. We finished a record with The Fell. I'm not sure what's going to happen with it, but something will happen with it. But thank you for asking. And again, thank you for all your incredible expertise, John. I appreciate it very much. We're going to be hanging later. I'm going to go to the Hartke booth in tent, I think it's tent number 12. I lost the number. It's number 12. How helpful you are. Thank you, my dear. So I'll be there. If you have anything you want me to sign, I'll be happy to do so. Want to take a photo or just want to say hello, that'd be totally cool. We're going to hang out there a bit. So one more good question. Yes, sir, right in the front. Yell it out for me. Good question. How often do I change bass strings? When I'm touring for real and playing live actual shows that are 90 minutes to 2 hours, they only last one show. So when I'm just hanging out, I can have a set on for many months because they're really not under that kind of strain. But when I play, I sweat, and it drips off my chin right onto the E string. So at the beginning of the night, and by the end of the night, it's completely soaking wet, and I am too. And it's very, and they get slippery too. So sometimes my hands get slippery on there. I can ruin my wrist by doing that. So when you put on a new set, they're rough, and the edges are sharp, so your fingers catch them easily. When you're pulling across, if the strings are too smooth, it slips off and it sounds different. So the callus that you develop by using a new set every night really adds to the tonality of the bass. Because as much as John and I and many of you here know that the gear is extremely important, I almost hate to say this when the manufacturers are listening, but most all of your tone is in your hands. It's really true. Now the gear helps, and we love it, and the gear can really push it over the top for you. And I'm forever grateful for the wonderful gear I get to play through. But your hands have so much to do with it, and so getting a really great callus. I just see now that the little holes in my fingers at the end there from fretting. As the tour goes on, they go deep, and if I ever went blind, I could never read Braille because I just no way I could read those tiny dots through these calluses. It would be kind of an oddball way of putting it, I know, I'm sorry. But it's important to get those calluses, so when you're sweating like crazy, the strings will never last. And plus, when I see them the next day and they come off, they're all chewed up and bent at the frets. Because when you play, you hit things with a different level of strength. As I'm up here doing a clinic, and I notice when I do clinics, I got like this much bandwidth of what I can do, what I can perform, what I can actually pull off. Live, it goes much greater because you just get that extra energy you have when you walk out and there's people there and you're on stage and you're performing. Much different than a speaking thing like this or a hanging out thing. And you start to hit it so hard, you begin to become immune to pain. Many times I'll be playing, and as I'm playing, and sweat is, and I run up the mic and singing and running around doing it. I notice my hands are getting sticky. What's going on? I look down, oh, it's blood. I'm cut somewhere. I don't know where, because you don't feel it. And I've been on stage as sick as a dog, barely able to stand up. But as soon as the band hit, everything felt normal. I was okay. At the end, I paid for it, but I managed to get through. So that's a little bit of the part of why I want to change strings every night, is to get them fresh, new, sharp cutting. They get a lot more high end to them. And as your fingers go over them and wear, that skin wears into the string. When I was broke, I used to take the strings off, put them in a pan, coil them, put them in a pan of water, and boil them. Put maybe a drop of detergent in there to break up any oils. Put them back on, and they were bright, brand new. But they break easier that way. And a couple of times back in those days, I had strings break in the middle of a show, maybe 3 or 4 times. Since then, a new set, I've never had a string break, ever. So that's one of the liabilities of reusing strings over and over again. Another good thing to do is when you're done, get either Old Spice or Aqua Velva aftershave. You can use alcohol, but it doesn't smell good, and the bass is very sweaty and fermenting. So maybe the little Old Spice will help defray some of the fermentation byproducts, otherwise known as stink, on your strap. So you can wipe them down with aftershave or pure rubbing alcohol, and that'll bring them back really well too. And I take a towel, soak it, and just rub up and down. You can bring an old set back really well that way. And like I said, these are Rotosound strings, and I hope I answered your question. All right, one more question, and then we'll call it a clinic. Yes, sir, right there. Yell it out for my deaf ears. The drill. Oh, the drill. Yeah, the drill has a story, actually. It was in Mr. Big, we did a song called, well, actually, in Paul Gilbert's solo, he used the drill just as a joke. It was comedy. Because somebody said one time, he plays so fast, the only way you could play faster is put picks on the end of a drill and pull the trigger. Well, it turns out that's not true. We can both play faster than the drill, but that's beside the point. So we got drill with the picks on it, and it was kind of a good gag. It went over. So when we did the Lean Into It record, the second record, we thought, why not use the drills on a song. So we did a harmony, bass, and guitar drill solo in that song, just for a laugh. So unknown to us, our manager at the time, a legendary guy, Mr. Herbie Herbert, we're out on tour, and sure enough, To Be With You starts going, and I got a hit single, and things are popping for us, and it's really great. So unknown to us, Herbie contacted the Makita Power Tool Company and said to them, I'd like to have a meeting with you. So he actually flew two of them over to his office in San Francisco, got a translator, sat down with them, and explained to them what endorsements were, because they never had no one ever endorsed Makita Power Tools before. No one ever done it. So he explained to them what the difference between Michael Jackson and Michael Jordan's endorsement and what it's all about and what it means and everything. Then he asked the translator, are they ready? Yes, I think so. He goes, we would like to know if you want Mr. Big to endorse Makita Power Tools. And they said, yes. How much? God bless his soul. Herbie said, $1 million. They said yes. It was a joke. It was a comedy. So our tour, all the background was all Makita Power Tool drills and the artwork. And we got all kinds of free tools. It was really great. We got everybody in the band got to pick some free tools at the end of the tour, and one guy got his dad an electric screwdriver. I think Pat Torpy got a miter saw to do some crown molding. And I just saw at the bottom was a generator. What the heck? I got a generator. So in 1994, the Northridge Earthquake happened in LA. I just walked in the door. The whole city shook like you can't imagine. The floor of where I was 18 inches of structural concrete. I was airborne. I was up in the air from the jolting. Everything smashed and crashed. Everything came out of the refrigerator, out of the cupboards. Walls cracked. I just held tight, waiting for the ceiling to hit my head and say my last, have my last thought. It finally ended, got finished. Went to my neighbors. We got everybody's hot water tank turned off. Again, went around every place. And now we realized it's pitch black, no power anywhere, no matter what. I remembered, hey, I got a Makita generator in my garage. It's still in the crate. Went out, got the Makita generator, sucked on a little hose, filled it up with gas. The first pull, we were the only people with power in Sherman Oaks for a week. So what started out as a joke actually became a quite wonderful thing. So I'll play a little bit more, and we'll see what happens, and then I'll say my final words if that's okay. You're very kind, very forgiving, and very generous. Thank you. Very nice. Well, I'll end with a little story. A dear friend of mine, and I just saw him recently too. His name was Rick Rischel. We went to grammar school together. And I didn't have a bass yet. I just had my sister's acoustic guitar, and he had his little acoustic guitar. And we would get together and play guitar. And we played Pictures of Matchstick Men by Status Quo. You remember that one, I'm sure. And Paul Revere and the Raiders' Kicks, and all these songs that we liked at the time. And we loved playing guitar. And it turns out he had one other interest. It was exactly a parallel of mine, and he loved fishing too. I loved fishing, was into fishing. So we would talk about fishing, and his dad was a fly tyer, and they would tie these size 22 hooks this long and about that wide, and tie these amazing, immense, complicated, beautiful trout flies to catch fish with, and mostly fly fishing. I did some other stuff, but he was mostly purist a fly fisher. So we had two great interests there. We'd play our guitars and talk about fishing. It would be amazing. One day we'd love to just fish forever or play guitar forever. We had two catalogs. We had the Gibson catalog from way back in the 60s. I wish I still had it. And we'd look at the Gibson catalog and look at the guitars in there and the basses, and I said, man, wouldn't it be like amazing like to be in a band and like play music like for a living? It would be unbelievable. And then we had another catalog by a company called Orvis. Orvis, you may know them now. They do clothing and various outdoor equipment and gear. But back then, they were just a fishing company. They made fly rods, split bamboo fly rods, and they sold flies, and they had all the fly gear, but it was super expensive, way over our budget. So we'd look at this Orvis catalog and just dream, like amazing. Like a fly rod for $200 might as well have been $20,000 for us. It was so far out of our range. So we're looking at the Orvis catalog and thinking, man, wouldn't it be like great to like fish for a living, be a lure tester or something, call corporate, this one's working, just anything, be so cool. And so we'd play around some more, fish some more, and say, yeah, it'd be great to be in a band or fish for a living, it'd be so great. So we lost touch with each other. Our families knew each other. He kind of moved off. I moved off. I'm in a band. Things are happening for me now. I'm in Mr. Big. We're touring around. We're playing in Vermont. And somebody comes. I hadn't seen Rich in decades. Somebody comes. So somebody backstage said he wants to say hi to you. He said he went to school with you. Who is it? Rich. Well, Rich who? Rich Rishel. I go, you're kidding. So I went back, and there he was, as big as life, all grown up. Unbelievable. I can't believe it. You're here. So we start talking about, oh, man, it's amazing. I haven't seen you for so long. How's your mom? How's your mom? Okay, cool, everything. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he goes, hey. I go, what? He goes, you did it. I go, did what? Because you did what we said. Remember, you said you wanted to play in a band for a living. And I said, and up to that point, until that moment, I've completely forgotten about making that statement and having that exact dream to play music for a living. And there I was. And I said, man, I didn't even think about that until you mentioned it. It took me by surprise a little bit. Incredible. Thank you so much for reminding me. He goes, it's amazing. He goes, yeah, I'm watching your career on TV, and it's so great. Oh, thanks so much, man. He goes, hold on a second, I got something for you. Reaches out of the room, pulls in a velvet-covered aluminum tube. What is this? Let's open it up. So I slide it off. It's an Orvis fly rod. I go, where did you get this? He goes, I work for Orvis and I fish for a living. Point being, if you dream it, it can happen no matter what the circumstances, no matter who you are, no matter what you are, how old, how young, no matter what. I firmly believe that because I was just some skinny punk kid in Buffalo, New York, and I did achieve what I wanted to achieve. He did the same thing. Another friend of mine who, unfortunately, we just lost, a guy named Mike Migliori, incredible sax player, loved all the big bands. He ended up playing with Buddy Miles, with Woody Herman, with all the great big bands. His dreams came true, too, and I know yours can as well. And again, no matter where you're at, young or old, rich or poor, I do honestly believe if you put it there and really want it, I think it can happen. And music is an incredible pathway to that as well. So I want to thank you for your attention. Thank you for being here. To those fellow musicians, I wish you all the very, very best. It's a tough business to get anywhere, but even if you don't get anywhere, you're still a musician, and you're way ahead. Being a musician right there sometimes is reward enough. So thank you all. I'll see you at the Hartke booth. Much love and respect to you all. Thank you very much.